Thank you so much to Marcus Evans, to my colleague and friend Craig for being on with us. Really excited to bring to you this town hall feature to discuss sort of the patient and site experience during the COVID-19 era period that we're in today, and hopefully soon strategies that can continue beyond. So want to just kind of reset the agenda for everybody. As we discussed a lot in our promo, the agenda really in the topics of conversation have been set by you guys, the audience. Craig and I are here to just help answer some of the questions and facilitate the questions. So we'll start with some of the great questions that were submitted prior to the event. We'll answer a few of those, and then we'll open it up to the audience as a whole to ask any additional questions that you might have, or comment on something that Craig and I say. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. Any kind of things like that, are definitely all available and welcome. So that's really how we'll go for the day. Quick shout out to my wife for cutting my hair for the event. I really appreciate it. So thanks so much, Alyssa. She's probably just listening upstairs. So
nice really job, Aaron. That was pretty bold. That was pretty bold.
Yeah, I know. Just before the event. And obviously, thanks so much to my 11-month-old son, Daniel, for napping during this. We got to get through this quick, Craig, because you never know when he's just going to kind of wake up and go. But I'll introduce you, Craig, and thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks, Aaron. And as you can see, I have not trusted my spouse with any scissors, or my kids with any scissors. Hi, everyone. My name is Craig Lipset. It's great to see so many that have joined here. It's great to be here with you, Aaron, and I appreciate this chance to talk about some of the questions that are on folks' minds right now. There are a lot of questions out there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we'll jump right on in. So I'll ask Craig. I'll give you the first question here. What proportion of trials will use DCT elements post-COVID, and are there any disease areas that will not adopt them as a standard? And maybe also just briefly explain what DCT means for everybody if they're not familiar with it.
Absolutely. So DCT is an acronym for decentralized trials, and it's I think the jargon that a lot of people have rallied around. There have been other names out there: remote, virtual, siteless. But I think decentralized seems to resonate with most. It's the language the regulators sort of rallied around with the recommendations put out by the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, CITI. So I do tend to use that jargon myself. I think some of the others can be confusing or misleading for folks. But the question is around what proportion of trials will use DCT elements. And I think that's a really good question, because by asking the question about using DCT elements, it makes clear that not all trials are going to be fully decentralized going forward. They're not all fully decentralized today. The idea that trials, need to be, or that's necessarily the right destination for every study is just not true. But most all studies will need to incorporate some element of decentralization. It's the only way the trials have been continuing today, and it's the only way that we can mitigate risk for the rest of 2019 and for the rest of 2020 and into 2021. You can see I'm trying to live in the past. The idea that we could start a new study without having a vaccine available and not have any decentralized strategies for our studies would be simply too risky right now. Even if sponsors and CROs try to go to geographies that feel safe right now, no one can have any confidence that there will not be a resurgence of cases and another lockdown in any geography in the world. And so these decentralized approaches need to become risk mitigation strategies for all trials right now. And the real question will be how many studies are using them in the first line, meaning that up front they're allowing patients to have options to stay home for certain visits, and how many will keep those as their second line emergency option, the in case of emergency break glass lever that they'll need to pull if there is another crisis. I think honestly the only studies that this becomes a real barrier to are a small number of instances, such as dose escalation studies with an infused therapy, certain PK studies where there's a high density of sampling, certain studies that have not made good use of this time to rethink their endpoints, and so are stuck with a legacy endpoint that doesn't offer opportunities for capture outside of the clinic. But short of those, most all trials will need to include some DCT elements going forward.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was curious your thoughts on that, Aaron, and also if you think that telehealth is then going to stick around, as we think right. both during this pandemic and beyond.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions about telehealth and whether that's here to stay or if it's just kind of a flash and then it'll go away. And my sense and feeling is that it is here to stay. Probably should have been more incorporated more prior to sort of the environment that we are in, because it can be helpful. And I think there are a couple of things that will probably continue to hit on constantly throughout today's discussion. One is, who is the healthcare consumer and what are their wants and needs, and how in clinical studies can we make sure that we are fitting the needs of what the healthcare consumer needs today in terms of similarities in managing their health. And then the other part of it is sort of the complement between high tech and high touch, and the importance of certainly implementing technology, but also understanding that still, most people still want to see their doctor, want to have a conversation with their doctor in person, live. And so the complement of the two, I think is really where we're going to, I personally see things going, a healthy balance of that high tech and high touch. But yeah, in terms of the healthcare consumer, I mean, the number one thing is convenience and accessibility. And certainly telehealth measures and technologies and tactics that exist help with that convenience and accessibility that the healthcare consumer really wants today with regards to managing their health. And participating in a clinical study is part of managing their health, part of managing their condition. So the expectation, I believe, for the consumer is that tools that exist within the telehealth frame and outside of that, other technologies, will be a part of clinical studies where they can be.
I think, in a lot of ways from what you're describing, Aaron, I really think the future of most everything in our lives feels like it's going to be hybrid. When we think about education, business meetings, healthcare delivery, food shopping, I feel like in all these cases, the pendulum has swung really hard and we're all stuck at home and we're all constrained in terms of the ways that we're able to engage. But when it swings back, it's going to land in a different place where we were before, one where in most cases, we, the consumers, will expect to have more choice in how we're engaging whenever possible. And I think telehealth is going to become a big enabler of what that looks like in clinical research.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that telehealth sort of dives into, which is one of the next questions, is sort of the role of the site, right? And how, and the question really is, how is the role of sites or site networks possibly going to change to adapt to a post-pandemic world?
When I was involved with doing the first remote trial when I was at Pfizer, and that was like over a decade ago, I remember going to a DIA meeting when we had first shared what we were working on, and I felt like sites were throwing daggers at me when I walked by, like I had it in for the site. The idea of decentralized trials in general was never to make that the end of the investigator site, certainly not in my book. The idea, the priority for decentralized trials is to open more doors, more access, more opportunities for patients to participate. And for patients who really value that high-touch interaction of going into a site, I don't want to see that option taken away for anybody. I want to see more doors opened, more ways that patients can engage, more ways that diverse and more representative patients can be able to participate, more ways that patients that aren't in geographic proximity of a site can participate. So when I think about sites going forward, To me, it's not in either or. To me, it's not a question of how do we enable decentralized trials that will disrupt or displace the site or put them out of business. To me, the question is how do we amplify sites and kind of superpower them with telemedicine and other types of remote monitoring capabilities so that when patients are participating, they can have choice and how and where they participate. For some instances, they'll have to go into a site, but whenever possible, how can we give patients choice? And in order for that to work, we still need to have sites. We need them to be open. We need them to be in business, right? So these are certainly some key challenges that many small investigator sites are trying to grapple with during this pandemic. But I think the opportunity and the challenge for most sites going forward is how do they become telemedicine friendly? How do they become remote visit friendly? I think one of the challenges for me, for most investigator sites right now is how much of this do I as a site take on myself and go out and find technology and embed into my workflow, and how much of this will sponsors and CROs continue to want to pass down for a given study. I feel like in the world of telemedicine, it feels like the first generation of electronic data capture, when we used to drop off laptops for every study and sort of push technology down to the site, and that eventually we'll need to start to see how telemedicine moves to give the sites more flexibility to use the tech and the platforms that work best for their workflow, but where sponsors and CROs can have confidence in the compliance around them and be able to view the key performance measures that are important for them for keeping track of a study operationally. Site networks themselves, I think, will continue to exist. I think they'll continue to thrive. I think IROs will continue to make an impact in that space as well. What are your thoughts on that one, Aaron, on the future for sites?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I actually just had a virtual visit with my doctor the other day, and I loved it, and I think she did as well. I mean, it was nice to have that sort of personal communication, through video, but you still, again, kind of going back to that same concept. I mean, that is the ultimate sort of complementary, high-tech, high-touch moment right there when you're seeing your doctor, and still able to ask the same kind of questions and go through the same and similar things. And, even outside of that, I have a trainer that I work with. I'm trying to buff up Craig, and I have a trainer that I work with, and I used to go see him all the time. Obviously, I can't see him now. So what does he do? We have virtual sessions together where he's giving me new things to do, and he's giving me new exercises to do. And I've even spoken with a lot of my friends who are doctors who just started to do more telemedicine visits, and they love it for the same reason that the healthcare consumer loves it as well: the convenience and easy access, the multiple avenues of touch points that are available. So I would agree. I don't think that these types of things are going to hinder anything from the site perspective. The need for the site, this physician, that will always continue to be there. And so as in terms of things that are moving forward, I just see only positive things and more relationship building pieces. I think we always talk about that with regard to patient engagement. One of the things that we work on at BBK is really to facilitate a positive relationship between the site and the patient, and even further that through the site for the sponsor and the patient, right? Really trying to make that positive engagement connection to foster a strong environment for the patient to participate in the clinical trial. And I only see things like telemedicine helping bridge that gap and helping create that more positive relationship moving forward.
Well, while I'm in this room of our house having this conversation, my wife is in the other room seeing patients through DoxyMe, through one of the available telemedicine platforms that are available for physicians right now. And she's certainly one who 2 months ago did not want to touch a telemedicine interaction with a patient, but she wants to get back in front of patients again, but absolutely can see how this hybrid future will fit into her practice and her workflow. That again, that this pendulum has swung hard, but it'll land in probably a better space. Aaron, there is a question from the audience that maybe you could use as at the end of the event, just based on one of your comments. How many burpees can you do in a row? But maybe I'll use that to take us out at the end of the hour, and people can look forward to that before lunch.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know how many I could do right now. I'm a little slow. Got a little bit of a backache.
Yeah, I'm not going to go there with you, though. I'll tell you that. Hey, one question though, as we talk about these studies using these tools, it's not right for every study. How do different teams know what virtual elements, what remote elements are right for any given study?
Yeah, so I think that's the one thing that we that I think that we really try to pride ourselves on is everything really starts with a protocol analysis and a needs assessment, and when we do that, we're really trying to figure out what the problem is that we need to solve. Maybe it's number of scheduled visits. Maybe the visit schedule is really intense for the patient, or the medication regimen is really we've worked on multiple studies where the patient has to take their medication, every single day, or they have to attend a visit, every single week, et cetera, et cetera. So, I don't know that there is really a situation where some piece of virtual, right, couldn't be used, right? Virtual is so broad that, can you reduce study visits by using telemedicine or things like DoxyMe and stuff like that? Can you reduce study visits by having medication be transported to the patient? Then obviously always having the patient come in. Those kinds of things. Can you use an e-diary, ePro device to kind of facilitate a little bit of an easier collection of the data? All of those things kind of go through that protocol analysis and needs assessment, research that you can do to really identify what the problem is and what are the tools and technologies available to help alleviate that problem to enhance the patient's experience. So I guess sort of a broad answer is it could really, I don't know a lot of studies that couldn't use some aspect of a virtual study or include some part of it. It's really about identifying that problem, what that challenge is that's going to be a burden for the patient or the site to administer or participate in the study, and then evaluating the tools that are available to help with that challenge.
I get asked that question a lot, Aaron, and my answer is usually like, I'm not a woman with breast cancer. I'm not the parent of a child with Duchenne's. I don't have sickle cell. I am not your patient. I can tell you what types of tools and options can be made available, but the next step needs to be to go talk to your patients and to understand for the patients that you're looking to enroll, what are the burdens on them and the strategies that will make the most sense for them. I do think that, the biggest rate limiter to decentralized trials in general and moving things virtual and more in the home will continue to be the endpoints themselves. And that for too many sponsors, we're relying on outdated endpoints that keep us trapped into having patients come into the clinic for things to be done that could clearly be replaced with a better way to measure. The problem is our old endpoints are so fragile that if we don't acquire them exactly the same way each time and watch a patient walk for 6 minutes on a 20-meter track each time the same way, the whole endpoint collapses. But we know there are better ways. We know that there are different digital endpoints that can be validated with some effort that can give a better endpoint, a more robust endpoint, a less fragile endpoint that we can capture in more ways. But using that takes preparation. It takes lead time. And I'm hoping that that will be one of the outcomes on the other side of this, is that people in their clinical development plans are giving themselves the right time and capacity to rethink those endpoints.
Yeah. And I think sort of onto the extreme, not maybe a little bit just below the extreme side. I like this question that just came in because it's kind of a fun one to look at. How do you see something like Alexa being used in clinical trials and for patients?
I think for a lot of people for a while, there's been this talk and aspiration of what is a concierge-like experience for patients, and what is the real or digital or type of concierge that we can deploy that can help support patients during their participation. I think the Alexa and conversational AI and chat bots in general have some great opportunities that have been kind of on the bench certainly for the ability to help patients during their participation. And I think that as we shift more away from the clinic for all visits, the opportunity to use chatbot that can help patients to manage their participation and answer questions, it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for that digital concierge to come to life. I also think there are great use cases for Alexa and chatbots to improve engagement with investigators and coordinators. That was my Alexa getting pissed off that I keep dropping her name. You know, I feel like, you know, a fun game on webinars like this is to say, hey, Siri, and watch how many people's phones just lit up.
Right.
She's going to get pissed off, so I'm not going to say her name anymore on this webinar. But endpoints as well, by the way, the ability to capture, to use voice for endpoints can be a great future where we can start to see how we move away from quality of life questionnaires and how instead we can have chatbots that just ask how you are today and are interactive and listening to your voice and able to extract the data in a validated way that we're looking for rather than just asking the same questions to the same people.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we've started to, you know, start to see the exploration of Alexa from a number of different angles. One of the angles that I look at it is sort of just the, you know, how tech savvy is the person who's involved with using Alexa, and is that something that they use in their everyday life, right? I mean, there are a lot of people who use it to order things off Amazon, build their grocery list, remind them of different things that they have going on throughout the day. Some houses are kitted completely with Alexas or other devices, and some people just don't choose to use them as well. So, you know, the only thing that I caution about things like Alexa is to always consider taking the multi-platform approach. It's not always one size fits all, and everybody seems to want to manage their conditions or manage their health differently, either using wearables or Alexa to still writing things down on a piece of paper. So the one thing that I think you always have to think about is, can I provide multiple options for the people to participate and engage in my clinical study, and not just only rely on one sort of piece of technology? That would be the one thing that I would add to what you're saying. We are getting a ton of questions in here, Craig. Oh my goodness. You want to pick one out, or you want me to keep going?
Well, just one quick follow-on just to the conversation we were having. There was a question about, well, to develop new endpoints is expensive and time-intensive, and I actually agree. And I think that developing new endpoints is a dish that's best shared. I think that, you know, in many cases, no single organization even wants to own a new endpoint in terms of a sponsor or even a CRO. If you want patients, providers, regulators, payers to all believe in that endpoint, we need to see it widely used. And so developing new endpoints can certainly work best by partnering. And those partners can be pretty broad, whether with an advocacy group, with a tech partner, with other pharma that are engaged in this area, because it does take time and it is often at risk. You often have to validate that new measurement, even when your medicine is early in development, well before you'll actually use it. And the medicine may not move forward for a lot of other reasons. What else do you see on the list, Aaron? What do you like for questions here?
I also kind of like the idea, you know, there is a good question about geographic regions and the differences between countries. And maybe you can quickly comment on the differences that, you know, we see across geographic regions. And do you anticipate some of the challenges being reduced?
So certainly right now, you know, when we look at data that groups like WCG have been posting regularly on a weekly basis, and they're in the WCG, the central IRB that they are, you know, covers a lot of the U.S. as well as some ex-U.S., and they're reporting that around 12-13% of sites are still actively enrolling. But groups like Medidata are also publishing pretty regular updates in terms of what enrollment is looking like on a country-by-country basis for year over year. So we could look, for instance, at April 2020 versus April 2019 and see how that significant drop on a global basis and how the drop has increased in May versus April on a global basis in terms of the drop of new patient enrollment in May of 2020 versus May of 2019. But to your point and to the point of this question, the distribution is not evenly is not even right across the globe. And when we look at certain countries like China and South Korea, the rates are still down for new enrollment, but they're not down as much year over year for those geographies as other parts of the world. And when we look at other data that's coming in about new study starts, a lot of people are pointing to the Pacific region right now as a place where new studies are starting up. And certainly what that tells us is a lot of study teams aren't making generalized policies that we're not enrolling and not starting new studies, but they're looking for those geographies where they can. I think the organizations will continue to do that throughout 2020. I think starting a new study in Midtown Manhattan or in downtown Boston right now is going to be a challenge compared to other geographies in the U.S. But I think the note of caution for everybody right now is we don't know where the next hotspot will be, and we don't know where the next incident will then flare up later this year or even early next. And so this is where we need to have the proper countermeasures. We need to start new studies with the right risk mitigation in place in terms of the ability to either include decentralized approaches up front or have them ready to deploy in the event that they're needed.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, a very similar question that we received, as part of it was just sort of the willingness of the patient globally to return to research at, during this time, particularly for illnesses that are not fatal or that develop over a long period of time, things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, et cetera. That's kind of the basis of the question. I think, while we are seeing enrollment low currently, obviously that can and will change over time, but also the value of the patient that is still in the study is obviously increased. And so while enrollment might be low, that doesn't stop patients who are currently participating in clinical trials to continue to want to participate in clinical trials. So I think the notion of decentralized trials is really important. Things like medication delivery, you work on a rare disease study. That's a really, that ultra rare disease studies where you see a lot of global need to find patients. How are you making sure that they're still able to participate? Can you change them from maybe going cross country to find a site to working with a site that's closer nearby? We've been doing things like that to, even longer term stay in a different country to provide times for the patient to be quarantined for a specific period of time before entering the site. So, I think the challenge is really, as you said, sort of, based on sort of how we see the different pop-ups of COVID-19 continue to rise, and then how are we sort of using the telemedicine tools, the decentralized tools that are available to us to help facilitate the ongoing participation of patients who are currently enrolled in studies is going to be really interesting to see.
It's such an interesting time in terms of just thinking about recruitment in general, Aaron. Research awareness is front and center as never before. I realize we're coming up on Clinical Trial Day with the ACRP, so people should keep that in mind as a big awareness day. But outside of that, clinical trials are in the news every day. We're watching governors and president and others who are sharing updates on the status of clinical trials. It's front and center on people's minds. And so I think we're coming into this time when research awareness is probably reaching a volume it's never seen before. But unfortunately, at the same time, that many with chronic conditions will be strongly discouraged or disincentivized from leaving the house to go participate. And so it is interesting to try and forecast and imagine what the impact will be on recruitment as we try to reach a new normal over the next year and a half and try to resume enrollment. How do we leverage the awareness that's out there, but also help patients to mitigate the exposure, the risk, and the fears that they're going to be confronting? What are your thoughts on that one, Aaron?
Well, yeah, I think that that's kind of one of the big challenges that BBK as a recruitment vendor has, is really kind of trying to figure out, um, how do we work with our clients to develop a program that will make people feel comfortable to continue to participate. And a lot of that goes back to something that you said a while ago, which is, well, let's just ask people and see what the needs are, and so we've been rolling out a number of different patient voice-based surveys, a number of site-based voice surveys, to really try to get the response back from the people who are interested in participating, might be a little nervous to participate, and what they might need in order to continue to participate or to continue to qualify for a study. And I think one of the things that you're seeing a lot of is can I have remote access? Is there a way for me to stay in my home and receive my medication? Is there a way for me to, is there a way for me to stay in my home and still have certain procedures done? We've seen not only just the uptick in medication delivery that we're working on, but also the uptick in having either site staff or study nurses go to a patient's home to do blood draws or things like that. So, and whether they're comfortable with that or not. So you're seeing a real, I think, collaborative environment between the pharmaceutical companies, us and the patients and sites, to really kind of figure out, okay, well, what's the best way that we can still continue to move these things forward? And that's kind of what, the biggest challenges I would say that we currently have are is identifying those and then developing the solutions to it. And in thinking about like all of the fun technology things that we've created today, you can't forget about the regulatory agencies. And so maybe we talk about that for just a quick second. And one of the questions are what could or should be the role of the regulatory agencies in proactively supporting collaboration, validation of novel digital endpoints, those kinds of things.
It's interesting. I keep looking back at the regulatory guidance. The FDA has been great with their guidance document for organizations running studies during this time. They keep updating and refreshing that guidance with new FAQs, and so they've been fantastic around that. But when you read the FAQ, when you read the document, the FDA hasn't had to lower barriers and lower bars that people now are able to use certain tools that they couldn't have used before. In most cases, the guidance document is simply encouraging people to use what's available, to document it, and to follow known processes in terms of engaging with ethics committees, making the agency aware, taking urgent action first if patient safety is at risk. The agency as well are the ones who led the initiative with the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, CITI. Their whole mobile clinical trials workstream was launched by leaders from the FDA. I had the opportunity to be a part of their original program committee when they put that together, and that workstream included setting pathways more clearly for folks around digital endpoints, as well as around decentralized trials and other mobile use cases in general. And so I feel like we keep looking back to the regulators saying, we want more, and they've been stepping up. But I think that it's up to sponsors, CROs, and others to step up as well. The agency needs things to react to. They need proposals for new endpoints to actually see submitted in thoughtful ways and give them substrate to either say yes or no or here's why, because otherwise we're just talking in hypotheticals. In most cases, when I talk to study teams that have gone down that route, it doesn't end up with a no. It tends to be either a yes or let's talk more. And that's what we need to see, is like that type of engagement. And then what we need to see are those experiences getting out there and getting shared. Right now, the FDA's website that tracks novel endpoints that have been used only lists for studies that have been completed for registrations. It doesn't list for studies that are underway or conversations that they're having. But if you look at the Digital Medicine Society's website, DIME, they actually keep a crowdsourced list of different endpoints in their state of validation of digital endpoints. And so there are quite a bit of resources that are out there for people. But I'm hesitant to say that we have to keep knocking on the agency's door to lead us here. I really think it's time for sponsors and others to own this space and to bring fresh solutions to the regulators for them to react to.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that quickly, as we're coming up on the clock here, we recently did a video interview series with a woman from the IRB at VARA, and one of the things that she talked about was sort of what you're exactly saying: a collaborative, cooperative environment, bringing them things to react to, but also having us lead the way in the ideas and fostering a place where we can all kind of work on those things together. She also kind of mentioned that, based on where things are now, if you need to add something to a study, there are definitely ways to do it. So if you don't have patient reimbursement involved in your clinical trials, and that's something that you want to add to help ensure that patients can still participate, there are ways that you can do that easily in working with the IRB. So I think, just to echo your point about that sort of cooperative, collaborative environment, I invite people to go and check out that interview. That's really one of her main messages throughout is just that. So I just want to, let's maybe do one more, and then, as we talked about at the end, Craig and I will answer a lot of the other questions. We'll do some more social media videos. Maybe Craig will speak, maybe he won't. Maybe we'll do more chat bubbles. We'll see how it goes. But we'll definitely try to get to as many as you can.
I've gotten much better at this. My daughter completely schooled me on Snapchat, so you can really put me to the test.
Well, maybe we'll do one on TikTok. You never know. So maybe but with just one more question, and I think this is kind of a good one here. Oh, wait, I just lost it. Hold on one second. Oh, where'd it go? Okay, here it is. Sorry. Can you give examples of where remote access is commonly provided to study participants now and in an innovative way? Yeah, this is a nice one, because I think we talked a lot about big theory, but what are some good examples, Craig?
Well, certainly, I think the primary technology supporting remote access today is the telephone. And we're certainly seeing how, just the ability to have regular phone contact between the investigator, staff, and the patient is how a lot of remote participation is being managed today. I think that the extensions around that probably creep up very quickly in terms of other examples are the use of video platforms that are increasingly available, and there are solutions out there, whether it's the ones that we're talking about here. There are vendors out there that have them. There are specifically for clinical trials. There are solutions that have been embedded into CTMS products and embedded into different ePro solutions that exist. And so there are quite a few options available right now to help use video as a strategy for supporting that spirit of remote access. I think the other elements around supporting remote access is also travel and transportation support. As we are able to resume and start to help patients to come back in, is making sure that they feel they have a safe and secure way to travel to the site, to avoid public transportation if necessary, and what are the other strategies for transportation support that we can provide patients when they feel it's safe to go back to the clinic, when the staff feel it's safe to reopen their doors, to help make sure patients can get there. Yeah,
I think, and just to echo off of the travel piece, that's kind of what I was gonna go for. I mean, again, a tremendous uptick we've seen in medication delivery. We've had to change our, we have it, without sounding too promo-y, we do have a travel program that we use often to help patients get to and from study visits. Now we're kind of using our same services and our same programs to kind of do the reverse, and provide medication delivery to patients, provide different tools that they might need to patients that are delivered. We had to go through a whole sort of regulatory sort of making sure that all the drivers and everything like that are always wearing gloves, are always wearing masks when they deliver things to the patient's house. So that's kind of been the big one that I've seen that's maybe a simple innovation. I guess the innovation around that is making sure that you're working with a company that has those kinds of regulations in place to understand those things. But then also just kind of video chats. I mean, using patient portals that are out there to connect to things like DoxyMe or other things like that to facilitate those to facilitate those kind of remote access pieces. And again, what I love about the idea of video is the high tech, high touch. You're seeing somebody in person, So you're using the technology, but you're not forgetting about the fact, the importance of that, the patient wanting to see, to be connected to the doctor while they're participating in a clinical trial. So I think those are simple ones that you can do.
Aaron, there's a great question here about making sure we're not leaving people behind as we try to see these new technologies coming to life, whether it's certain patient populations such as the elderly or those without reliable internet access, without access to devices, who are not digitally savvy. How do we make sure that these strategies, Aaron, become a way to democratize and open access and don't themselves become a limiter or barrier? What are you seeing for ways to make sure that this is a democratized technology space?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we try to work on is, again, going back to those patient surveys, what tools do you have available? And then trying to build around what the patient's needs are. So maybe they don't have internet access, but they have a phone that can do text messaging. Great, let's keep you updated through text messaging services if that's the way that you need to go. Through there, you can sort of respond, yep, I need my medication delivered at this time. So you try to think about ways to kind of move that forward as best as you can. I mean, I don't know many people who don't have access to some form of chat functionality available to them at this time, whether it be through the internet, through email, through text messaging services. It may be more phone-based than desktop-based. A lot more people interact with their health through mobile devices than through desktop space. But there are ways that you can do that. And the simple way of doing that is making sure that you can get a hold of the patient through their preferred device, asking them what their needs are that are going to participate. If you can't do video chat, okay, let's do text messaging. Let's do basic phone calls. All of those kinds of things.
And for those who do not have access, we never want that to be an eligibility criteria for a study. And so, right. The ability to provision devices or to provision internet access is a cost that, while it's not zero, but it's something that most study teams can handle if it means getting that patient the ability to participate. We've provisioned ePro devices for patients for years. And so the ability to continue to provision devices where it's needed, where patients don't have access, so we can keep them engaged. But one thing I'll say is, technology that's well designed. I watched my in-laws do a video interaction with their provider where they didn't have to call any kids or grandkids to help them get online. My in-laws were wondering, like, when I gave them their first iPad, their question was, now we don't touch the screen, right? So like my in-laws are right there amongst, any other stakeholder that you'd say, oh, these are not going to be tech-friendly folks, and yet able to pick up a link from a provider and get onto that video session. So I think when the technology is done right, it can work, but I know it's not going to work for everybody. And we always want to make sure that these are not going to remove opportunities, remove access, but only be additive.
Yeah, definitely make sure that it's not a barrier to participation. The other thing that has happened, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, Craig, is you can send a device to a patient. You can send a hotspot to a patient. So now they have Wi-Fi, right. They have a phone, and they can be able to participate if they need to. We're unfortunately going to have to wrap up. My favorite question of the day so far has been, will there be a baseball season this year? And I really hope so. And I'm clamoring for some kind of baseball. I watch the Korean Baseball League every morning now because I just need some sort of live sport. But anyways, all of that aside, I do want to just thank everybody for their participation. We will definitely answer a remainder of these questions through blog articles, through chats on LinkedIn and other social areas. Thank you, everybody, so much, and have a great day. And Craig, anything from you?
Look forward to seeing people online. Keep doing what we're doing and keep sharing these stories, these questions, these experiences. Thanks, everybody.